Welcome to A24 on the Rocks. Tonight I am drinking a Johnny Smoking Gun whiskey from 2 James Distillery because we're watching a Western tonight, Slow West. My name's Eric Kiska. Up next we have Cole the Ginger Ogre.
Hello, my name is Cole William Whitlaw Gibson, fastest gun in the West. I am drinking High West whiskey, the limited edition High Country style. Up next we got my boy Blaze.
Yo, what up? It's your boy Blaze Fitzgerald Ryan. Tonight I'm going back to the classic PBR. It's fantasy football night. Got this going on after this, so PBR, get it. Next up, we got K-Dog. K-Dog, what up?
What K-Dog?
Oh,
yeah,
shit.
but there's two of us that could be K-Dog.
Which one's the dog?
That's Kelly. Like I was clearly
I'll
Kelly.
be K-Dog. So it's me, Kelly. Kelly K-Dog Kiska. Drinking also Johnny Smoking Gun. Next, the K Con.
Good evening, world. This is Kevin K. Kononchek, and I missed the memo on drinking Western-themed whiskeys tonight, apparently, because I'm drinking Jefferson's Ocean, aged at sea, which, is a delicious bourbon, but nowhere near our theme for the night.
Okay, so we're going to continue this podcast without Kevin. Kevin got booted off.
Yeah, apparently I've just been kicked off the island.
Never.
A24 on the Rocks.
This film today is Slow West. It is set in 1870 Colorado, but it is shot in New Zealand and Scotland. This was partly produced by the New Zealand Film Commission, although our director and writer, John Maclean, is Scottish. It premiered at Sundance Film Festival on January 24th, 2015, and ended up winning the Sundance Institute's World Cinema Jury Prize for Dramatic Winner. So I did this for our A Most Violent Year episode, and I kind of wanted to have some fun and do this for this movie too. What was United States like in 1870? So first off, Colorado didn't become a state until 1876, even though California became a state in 1850, so Colorado was still very much the Wild Wild West in 1870. Former Civil War General Ulysses S. Grant was president, and the U.S. was in reconstruction from the Civil War, which ended 5 years earlier. This year, on March 30th, the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was passed, which gave the right to vote to black men, not women, sadly. This became law when the required number of states ratified it. Also, the U.S. Congress created the Department of Justice, and it was originally made to preserve civil rights, as the South was quite unruly at this time. And Georgia became the last southern state to be readmitted into the Union on July 15th, 1870, after agreeing to seat black members in the state legislature. On July 24th, the first trans-U.S. rail service begins. Robert E. Lee died of pneumonia on September 28th, 1870, former Confederate general. I pissed on his grave yesterday. And then National Weather Service issued its first weather forecast on November 1st, 1870, forecasting a windy day in Chicago. So, my first question is to Kevin. Who and where do you think you would be if you lived in the U.S. in 1870?
Wow. All right. First, I want to say an excellent way to start this episode because historically saying it sets the scene for this entire movie. But where would I be personally? I think I would probably be still in the Midwest. I bet you I'd be close to Chicago, to be honest with you. That's where my ancestors found themselves. So I'd probably be working in a factory somewhere in Chicago. That's it.
Now, are we going by, like, just me personally, or, like, where my family actually is at this time?
Where would you want to be, too? I think going for more where would you want to be?
Oh, well, then I got to
I was going to say, me personally, I would be 100% traveling out to the Wild Wild West. And probably probably like a scary short period of time, I would instantly become a bad person and just become an outlaw, a monger, and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm glad I'm probably not in, the Wild West era, because I would be, an outlaw for sure. I'd be a bad boy, robbing planes or robbing trains
Lumberjack.
and things like that.
Eric, my
Lumberjack?
answer is
Wanna be
lumberjack. now.
Okay.
That's what I would
Hell
be doing.
yeah.
Because I'd be up in the U.
That's fair.
Logging.
Kelly?
I would be barefoot and pregnant with my 5th child. I would be a master canner and homemaker. And at age 28, I would be pretty old, wouldn't I? There wouldn't be a lot going for me anymore. So I would just be prepping. I'd be sewing. I'd be the
Where do you
master
think you'd live?
homesteader. Oh, midway through the state. I can't picture myself being anything
Okay.
other than like
Blaze?
kind of Midwestern at heart. So
By the way, my outlaw name is Ginger Snap. Just throwing
Ginger
it out
snap.
there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Threatening.
Surprised you didn't want to be a coal miner. So mine's a little bit different. I really like the gossip part of Sweeney Todd, so I think I'd be like a barbershop or like a shaver guy because I think that'd be really cool. You get to pretend you're high influence. You get the mutton chops and the big hat, and downtown London, early 1800s. I think that'd be kind of fun.
I think I'm gonna go halfway between where I'd really want to be and where I think I'd be. I think I'd still be a mailman, but I would be riding a horse, and I would just be a mailman on a horse. But at nighttime, I would be writing
Pony
plays for
Express.
the local theater. And I don't know. I think maybe I personally would like to live like on a lake somewhere. Maybe I think I'd be in Vermont. I think I would love to live in Vermont. Back then, at least.
my whole thing, by the way, not to totally stop you, is like I wouldn't really have a choice to be
You
anything
could be an outlaw.
other than
That's
what
the whole
I
thing
named.
about outlaw
So
country.
that's the thing.
You could be you could be an outlaw
I'd be
in
a
outlaw
woman.
country.
Join the Ginger Snaps.
But
You could be a Spice
I'm a
Girl.
wimp,
So,
so
Eric,
the ginger.
Eric, you could be a founding member of the Pony Express because that happened right around the exact same time as our film.
1860, baby.
Love
Pony
that.
Express.
We know how well that
There
did.
we go.
I think that's what it was.
Yep,
So
you are
anyway,
correct, sir.
getting into the movie, Slow West. But history's awesome. A young Scottish boy named Jay Cavandish, played by Kodi Smit-McPhee, who was also in The Power of the Dog recently. He trucks into the wild western territory of Colorado, which is not a state yet. So it was very much still outlaw country and anarchy, as our lead man Jay finds out soon. Jay meets Silas Seller, played by Michael Fassbender, when Jay almost gets shot as he wanders upon some Westerners, some officers chasing a Native American through the woods. Silas saves Jay's life and offers to chaperone him to where he says, I want $100 for this, 50 now, 50 later. And Silas is very much a hardened man, an enigma, in the vein of an old John Wayne character. We soon learn Jay is trying to track down an unrequited love that he knew from Scotland. And our journey begins. So Blaze, give me your opening vibes first, and also how do you think they portrayed the Wild Wild West at this time?
Opening vibes. I was very into it in the beginning. I like the establishing shots of, I know it was shot in like New Zealand or something like that. What they showed of what was supposed to be, the Wild West between the, giant evergreen trees versus the vast plains. I thought they did a really good job of conveying that. The first scene itself was, as far as vibes go, confused because I didn't really understand what was going on. I thought that Silas was a bad guy, but it turns out that he turned out, it was like coming of age sort of thing. The scenery was gorgeous, and I thought it set up into what the bigger arcing parts of the movie were going to be, looking back on.
For sure. Kevin, opening vibes?
So I really enjoyed the start of this film, and it kind of brought me into it right off of the bat. The opening narration over the black screen was awesome because for me it set it up as more of a story vibe, like a legend we were about to listen to or watch instead of like an action film or something like that. It really just made you feel like, okay, you're just listening to the narrator and you're setting a scene. And that final line, his name was Jay, her name was Rose. It was just so fairy tale to me, and I just loved that it kind of set up the rest of the movie like, okay, this is going to be a little bit different than your classic Western or your classic, murder flick or whatever it may be. So that part I loved. And then obviously we go fade to the star scene with Jay counting out the stars of Orion and shooting them with his gun. And just that whole scene for me was just fantastic. And then it continues on, and I know I'm going to ramble a little bit here, but only because I really enjoyed it so much. But then we have that simple music cuts in with those wide shots of the scenery that Blaze mentioned, those big rolling hills. I think New Zealand is an interesting choice, but I also kind of like it because you're not concentrating necessarily on the scenery, you're concentrating on the people. So that sets up a wonderful backdrop for that. Then we get that scene with the ash coming down after the burned out Indian civilization, and that scene was just fantastic. So we go from a really peaceful setting, going through the woods, and then all of a sudden this jaw-dropping, death and horror scene. I just really enjoyed the first 5 minutes of this film, and it's set up for the rest of it.
Yeah. So Kelly, right off the bat, we get voiceover, and voiceover in film circles is sometimes frowned upon. Sometimes, if it's really done well, it's okay. We get by. What did you think of the choice to put voiceover in this film by writer and director John Maclean?
I think voiceover, for me, rarely works. I just think that it's a little bit too spoon-feeding the audience. I think it works well for Shrek. And I think Fight Club has voiceover that works quite well. But otherwise, I'm just never really into it. I find it really cheesy. But also I found this entire movie to be really cheesy, so maybe it was the right pick. But I'm kind of with Blaze, where I was just confused. Starting even with the voiceover, I was just like, oh, it's going to be one of these. That was my feeling.
Cool voiceover?
So, I mean, I could listen to Michael Fassbender all day long, so it did not bother me. And like Kevin said, I liked the intro a lot. It definitely alluded to a lot of things. I got big Romeo and Juliet vibes from the initial speech, and then they brought it in with the little star-crossed lover, and kind of, really opened it up later in the end. But I thought the voiceovers were good. Like I said, I'll listen to them all day long. I am with Kelly, though. Most of the time I like to be seen versus told. I like to see the story unfold versus kind of being told what the story is. If I'm going to get told, I'd read a book. But with Michael Fassbender, there's like certain people that I'm like, I'll listen to whatever this guy says for sure. He's got one of those voices that I'm just like, whatever you say, Mike, whatever you say.
Yep, he's great. So I wanted to talk about the screenplay a bit here. There were so many good one-liners in here. For example, right off the bat, when Jay's telling the officer hunting the Native American that he is Jay Cavandish, son of Lady Cavandish, the officer replies, "We're all sons of bitches." And, then, there's that group of black men playing music in French, and they say, that it's a song about love, and Jay replies in French, "Love is universal like death." Blaze, what did you think of the screenplay? Just right off the bat in that first 20 minutes, there's so many good one-liners in there.
Yeah, as far as one-liners go, I really do think it was really good. Towards the end of the movie, the Native American is shooting an arrow at Jay, and he puts his hand up to catch it, and Michael Fassbender goes, "Nice catch." And I literally laughed out loud at that. The dialogue itself was a little clunky, I thought. I thought it relied too heavily on the body language and facial images of the characters, because there wasn't a lot said, and when it was said, it was meant to progress the plot along more so than maybe I would have liked it to. I would like to get to know the characters more than, especially in the beginning. The first half, everyone seemed very one-dimensional, especially Ro, Jay, and Silas. I wish they would have expanded upon a bit. Once you get past the halfway part of the movie, it does open up, and you get to see Gregor McLean from Game of Thrones. But yeah, I thought the dialogue was okay. Like I said, there were some very funny parts, but it wasn't very Westerny, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Kevin, dialogue? Screenplay?
Screenplay and dialogue. I enjoyed it for the most part. I did it like the addition of the comedy bits that we were talking about. Some of Michael Fassbender's dialogue with Jay kind of either dragged for me or kind of got lost maybe in some of the accents or just some of the parts. I don't think it was necessarily a fault of the screenplay, just maybe the moment in me watching it and interpreting it that way. But in general, I thought it was an excellent script. Like I alluded to in my first vibes section, I really viewed this movie like I was kind of watching a storybook unfold. And for me, that changes how the dialogue is digested, because now I'm kind of looking at it from someone's telling me a fairy tale or telling me a story, and that changes how dialogue is had between characters and how the story goes. So if I'm viewing it from that perspective, I think that it's pretty good, and it allows me to get involved with the characters and move the story forward.
Sure. there's a very good line in here. Jay, he says, while looking at the moon, same stars, same moon. And he's talking about same stars, same moon back in Scotland. And he says, one day we'll be wandering on that moon. They'll build a railroad up and down the ways, a railroad to the moon. And when we get there, first thing we'll do is hunt the natives down. And I do think that Native Americans played an important backdrop in this film, although they weren't the central focus. So, Cole, how do you think they portrayed Native Americans in this film?
Yeah, so first thing, I hated the way he was talking about the railroad to the moon. I really did not like that scene. However, I thought the Native Americans, they portrayed them in a somewhat realistic-ish manner, where they basically said that, everyone was aware of the atrocities that were being committed, and they weren't trying to, I guess, shy away from it, but it did kind of seem like it just seemed off from the film. I guess in terms of just like randomly, they're just like, yeah, we're killing all the natives. All right, let's move on and do a little funny hijink. And then we come back and it's like, yeah, we just killed all these Native Americans. I'm writing a book about it, actually. And then, something bad happens or another hijink. So it was kind of weird. It didn't necessarily add to the story, but it definitely needed to be there as a part of the history and stuff. But it just seemed like a weird take on the whole situation, I guess.
Kelly, what did you think? And I'm not sure if you're the only one here, but you do have a little Native American ancestry in you.
I felt throughout this whole movie that it was just like, well, Kevin's kind of saying it's like a story, and I feel that way too. I feel like it's like a Scottish kid who actually never was in the West, and he was just reading the book about it and imagining saving his girlfriend, who doesn't even like him. So that was kind of my theory behind it. So with that, I have to put some, you gotta suspend disbelief, which I worked on consciously the entire time watching this movie, but it's so absurd, but in a subtle, not really put my foot all the way through the door kind of way, that when they put really realistic tragedies in front of you while all that is going on, that is a really hard teeter to walk on and do in the right way. So it created this, not even contrast, not even disrespect, but just discomfort of the way that they were handling it. And I don't know how they could have done it right. It's not by removing it, because it is good that they showcased it. But my thoughts were, I didn't like it.
Blaze, then Cole.
I just want to say there was a line where he met the German guy in the middle of the plains. And he actually said something very apropos about what was going on. He was talking about how, we're going to romanticize the Native Americans and, they're just going to become a footnote, but no one's really going to know who they are because we've taken everything away from them. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but, I thought that was, all things considered, I think that was a pretty good way to put what was going on in the world without showing everything that was going on in the world.
Mm-hmm. Cole?
Yeah, I just forgot one of my notes related to that was this feels like a Wes Anderson film that tried to deal with very weird, hard subjects, i.e. the Native American stuff. So it's like, Wes Anderson, go make a film about the Trail of Tears, but also it's not about the Trail of Tears; it's about the Scottish boy. So it was very weird. But Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I echo all of those things. It danced around the subject without really hitting the nail on the head, which, like Kelly said, you can't remove it from the story, but they also put it right in front of your face right off the bat, right? We get the wandering refugees, the burned out town, and of course these renegade Injun killers, as the movie calls them, and it sets up all the entire plot. So I guess I agree and disagree with everything we said, because it was necessary, but it also felt awkward. But I think that was also the intention of the director, to kind of just say, hey, this was an important part of our history. Let's not forget about it, and we'll use it as part of the story.
Yeah. Hollywood has historically not treated Native Americans well or portrayed them well, especially in old westerns. Stagecoach, I think, was a big showcase of how to not, portray Native Americans correctly. That's a very old classic. All the way up to, Marlon Brando was actually one of the first people to really say something about it in Hollywood when he decided not to accept his Best Actor award for The Godfather, and he put a Native American woman there in place to accept it. And I think even after that, though, Hollywood still didn't really get the message. And so this movie isn't really Hollywood, and I do think they dance around it and they don't exactly address it. But, this director and writer decided to put this movie in this time and place. So, hey, he wanted to tell the story. Either way, let's talk about Jay's chaperone Silas, played by Michael Fassbender. I feel John Maclean definitely wanted him to be that classic macho male Western character. He was a bit of a brute. He's done some bad things. He's an outlaw, and he wants to be better. He does have some moral compass down there, but we just have to find it. What do you think of Silas as a character here, and what do you think of Fassbender's portrayal of him? I'm going to give this to Kelly first.
Silas was hard for me to understand a lot of the time. I felt like a lot of his lines were kind of muttered or under like the sound barrier for me. But other than that, like, he's just, as you mentioned, he's just a character you've seen many, many times. I think outside of the dream sequence and the way that the movie ends, doesn't really stand out as anything special to me. And I love Michael Fassbender, just like Cole.
Mm-hmm.
So, just
Glorious
saying.
Bastard, shout out. He was so good in that. But, Cole?
I mean, I think Michael Fassbender did the best he could, but the way that his, character was written was to be a very, seemed like very one-dimensional, just like outlaw that's, trying to leave the outlaw lifestyle or whatever, but he's still using this kid to get the bounty and stuff. I don't know. I felt like it could have been played by anyone and would have given me the same feelings. I think they could have used Michael Fassbender a little bit better, a little bit differently, give him more depth. And like Kelly said, really the only time I genuinely cared about that character was at the very end, where I was just, what happened. So,
yeah, Kevin.
So, as you kind of alluded to, Eric, he was very much a character based off of Western mythology. It got very big Rooster Cogburn from True Grit vibes throughout the entire film. Not only that, but like the Coen Brothers remake of True Grit, there's also a lot of similarities to this film and that film from kind of some of the approaches that the directors took. So that was definitely a harken back, whether it was intentional or not. I did enjoy Fassbender, someone had mentioned earlier, his body language, right? That there was a lot of the language kind of conveyed that way more than some of the dialogue. And I thought that was important. I really enjoyed the scene where he was teaching Jay to shave with the giant Bowie knife, and that whole situation. I just enjoyed their interaction. They actually kind of had an odd couple vibe to some of their interactions throughout. Their chemistry was, these two don't really work, but they're developing a friendship, and clearly at the end that shines through in glorious fashion as we get to our climax. But I think that starting out, the confusion that you guys had mentioned about whether he's a good guy, whether he's a bad guy, also kind of fits his character too, because he had ulterior motives, right? He was hiding his true intentions with Jay from the beginning, and I think the viewer also kind of feels that, like, oh, you're a bad guy, and I don't really know, but it flushes itself out. So I enjoyed his performance overall.
Kevin, when you said harken, I really just wanted to go, hark! Lighthouse reference.
I appreciate that. That was
okay.
Good.
Blaze, Silas,
I'm going to go ahead and say that. Yeah.
As a character.
Cliche, but it's okay because it's a Western movie. And I really just thought that he was I hate to because everyone calls Han Solo, the cowboy of space. Well, this guy was kind of like the space smuggler of Westerns. But I really think it worked because this was Jay's story. This wasn't Silas's story. And although he had a great arc, and I'm not going to lie, I thought his arc was really cool at the end. When he's, when his chips are down, he's just trying to find a lighter for his cigar that he's always smoking. And he ends up doing the right thing when his whole character, I thought, especially looking back, he was really good at riding the line, and you didn't know if he was going to choose the right thing, especially when he ties Jay up to the tree. You're like, what is his issue? Because, there's the sniper guy, there's the gang coming. So, I didn't know it was going to happen, but I did love his redemption arc. And I thought, like Cole said, for, what they gave him, I think Michael Fassbender did a really good job with character given. But again, he's supposed to be, outlaw, trying to turn his life around, meets kid from the other side of his tracks, change. So, and that's fine. It's a Western. We can do that. So I thought it was cliche, but in the best ways possible.
So let's talk about the female character, Rose Ross, played by Karen Pistorius. Through a series of flashbacks, we figure out Jay loved Rose back in Scotland, but she did not love him back. And we also know that Rose and her father, who is Rory McCann, who played the Hound in Game of Thrones, they have a bounty on their heads because Silas, he has a wanted poster for them. And so we know from the pretty close to the start that Silas is has an idea that Jay is seeking out somebody somebody else has a bounty on, So what did you think of her character, Kelly? Was she an intriguing enough female character for this Western, and did they give her enough depth?
I don't think that she's very intriguing. She's just very much like a damsel in distress type for me. We never really got to know much about her. Maybe she had a boyfriend at the end, but otherwise she's just a girl in a castle, in quotes, waiting for her prince to come save her or something. They're in this cabin in the middle of nowhere with her dad, just waiting for the other shoe to drop, basically. And that's her whole story, and that's all we really ever get to know about her.
Do you think they really portrayed her as a damsel in distress, though? Because I really think before we get into the end, she was the one shooting all the guns at the end. In those flashbacks, we really do figure out, hey, Rose didn't really love you, Jay. She doesn't need you. She moved out west, and I think
she's a damsel in distress in the mind of Jay.
In his mind, which eventually I think we'll get to that. I think it gets turned on his head. I think, but Kevin, you were saying
so. I have a lot to say on this whole subject because it's interesting to me how they used the flashback as the major vehicle for making her character. Obviously, we get it flushed out kind of towards the end, but unless you're reading between the lines or rewatching the scenes while you're watching it live, you don't really catch a lot of her character. But going back and kind of analyzing it for, let's say, a movie podcast, you kind of do get a little bit more of she's the older girl and he's the younger boy crushing after her. And early on, she calls him a silly boy or something like that, one of the flashbacks. And that, in general, just kind of sets the tone for the rest of her. We'll talk about it in the end. I did enjoy her performance in the final scene. I think there were important parts there, which we'll talk about. I didn't take really anything else home from her performance in general, though.
And yeah, in those flashbacks, we do figure out that Jay professed his love for her, and she was just no, I'm not into you like that, basically. So,
yeah, you're a little brother to me. He's so friend zoned. That poor guy.
Which I'm gonna actually have a question for that later. Either way, we eventually figure out the whole reason Jay traveled all the way across the globe was due to some off chance Rose would see him again and love him. And Jay was much wealthier than Rose back in Scotland. And one day, when Jay's father figures out he is hiding at Rose's house, he comes over and disapproves of it, and then Rose's father accidentally pushes him, and he falls onto a rock and dies. What did you think of the backstory for these characters, and do you think Jay was brave and noble for making this journey, or do you think he was kind of pathetic? I'm going to give this one to Cole.
Jay is a sad, pathetic kid, is pretty much and he portrays it very well. He's a kid that doesn't know what he's actually doing. And it's really comes to light when he's thrown out into the Wild West. He's doing stuff that he shouldn't be doing. He has no business being there. He has no business chasing down Rose. He's, white knight syndrome to the max. And he got, the more I learned about why he's there and what he's doing and the flashbacks, the more I'm just this kid kind of sucks. He needs to... He needs to go back home.
Oh, man.
But that's just what I got from him.
Yeah. I would say he's kind of a romantic, Blaze, do you agree? Do you think he's brave and noble, pathetic, a romantic? Where do you think
he falls somewhere in that gray area, because I really did like his character for the most part. I really thought that, like you said, he lived in that old world romantic world where he's if I cross the West, she'll have to love me. And although you look at it in 2022, that's very creepy and off-putting. And I guess it is kind of creepy and off-putting even back in 1870, I guess. But I do think that his intentions were purer than, some incel on the internet. I do think that he truly loved her, and maybe she didn't feel the same way, but he had to see out to the end, because It's not driving to California to see your favorite OnlyFans model for her to shut the door in her face. This is crossing.
She's already said no, though.
Yes.
This
She's
is
already said no.
This is crossing the what? Yeah, but he wanted to prove, this is crossing the West to show that he would go through hell and high water for her. And you can take it as being a sin. You can take it as, that. But I do think...
And she's supposed to just love him because he did it?
I do think... you had your chance to talk. There is some nobility to doing that. So, was it the best thing? No, obviously he gets his comeuppance for it. But I don't think it was completely, creepy. So...
I'm going to drive my ass down to you, Blaze, and you better give me a blowjob when I get there. That's all I'm saying.
Only if you profess your love first.
What?
All right. A little behind-the-scenes knowledge there for everyone.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Kevin?
Wow. Where to even go with? I think he was a hopeless romantic in the biggest sense of the word. When Cole mentioned the Romeo and Juliet thing, that obviously sets that whole thing up. He's rich, she's poor. But that's kind of an interesting backdrop, too. So if he's already doing something that he's not supposed to be doing and being in an uncomfortable place and doing those things with interacting with, we'll say, peasants, maybe that's kind of partly for this, too. So he put himself in an uncomfortable situation in a place he probably didn't belong, and now he's doing it again. So that was interesting. And then, of course, we get at the end there, right, when Michael Fassbender's character says he loved you with all his heart, and Rose simply just replies that his heart was in the wrong place. Figuratively and literally, right? He shouldn't have been there. He should have been back home with his family, and he never should have fallen in love with someone who didn't love him back. But that's kind of the absurdity of this whole thing. And if you look at it kind of from the lens, and I know I've mentioned this several times now, but as a story, it is romantic and sweet, and it gives something the viewer to kind of hold on to, as most stories do.
So up next, in a great scene around a bonfire accompanied by some absinthe, we meet Payne, played by Ben Mendelsohn, who he's such a great actor. I love him. He was in Animal Kingdom. He was part of, I think it was Rogue One. He was in Dark Knight Rises. He's been in a lot of great films. He is with a gang of bounty hunters who are also hunting for Rose. And we don't get many words from Payne in this film. He is supposed to be this big bad villain. Do you think Ben Mendelsohn achieves this great villain status with what little words he had? I'm going to give this one to Cole.
I mean, his jacket definitely, said a lot.
Yeah,
that thing was fire.
I think, and the way he acted and the way he just strolled up to them with, a bottle of absinthe and some shot glasses, it was like, fuck it, we're gonna have a good time. I'm gonna get these boys fucked up, and then we'll get the information we need from him. Did he fulfill my hopes of being the true outlaw leader? No, not really. He looked the part, and I like that actor a lot, but besides that one scene with the absinthe, he doesn't do anything. He just like kind of, oh yeah, there he is. And then at the very end, where you have the big crescendo with the firefight and everyone, all the bounty hunters clashing and Rose and everything, he's just like, fucking kill the house. It's just like, okay. And then that scene, we can talk about that scene later, but it's just like, he could have done something better, something cool, something that showed he was a badass outlaw leader, but nah, he just got drunk he got those guys drunk and told everybody to kill a house. So
I also found something in my history book. In 1870 in Colorado, the drive-by was invented, and it was, specifically this scene. Anyway, Evan?
I really I enjoy Ben Mendelsohn as an actor, so that made falling in love with his character really easy. Cole mentioned the coat and the vibe of being the leader, but for me, I think it had that quiet charisma of somebody who just leads a group based on them being totally just freaking scared of the guy, and him being just ruthless. He has that line right before he's attempt to kill Rose at the end where it's not going to hurt, and it was just so creepy the way he said it. It was like he was caring about her before doing something just vicious and heinous. Other than that, there really wasn't too much to take home. I agree with Cole. There wasn't enough scene to digest in general with his character, although the absinthe scene was pretty excellent and gave us a good look into the history of Silas and him as far as their past together, and Silas running with that crew and why he escaped them and all of that stuff. Absent, I was kind of looking for a digital fairy to show up, to be honest with you, a la Eurotrip, but that didn't happen. Oh well.
Ben Mendelsohn's character, Payne, do you get any Jack Sparrow vibes from him? Like, I feel like the whole way he walked and carried himself, I got a lot of Jack Sparrow vibes.
Yeah, I think that his mannerisms were very Jack Sparrow-esque, Johnny Depp-esque, I guess you could say. Cole and Kevin alluded to. He wasn't on screen enough, but that absence scene and the scene directly after where they're at the campfire, it made me wish the movie had more of him and his posse in it, because that old guy's story about the wanted poster, really, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, if you guys have ever heard of that movie, that gave me
Yes.
such strong vibes of that. I'm like, oh my God, that is such a perfect, like, little creepy story about just creepy people that, want to be bigger than life. So I did like his character, and I liked the whole posse thing, but when you only get 10 minutes of screen time and 5 of it is just shooting in slow motion, there's not enough development. But there was definitely something there with that whole villainous side.
So, Kelly, my fellow lover of theater, Blaze, Cole?
Yeah.
You had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, to reiterate that this movie is basically an hour long. It's like an hour and like 15 minutes.
Hour 24 runtime.
Yeah, but you cut off the front and the back. You got an hour and 15 minutes. So it could have had plenty of time to really flesh him out. Plus, they show him. I just looked it up. They show him the first time is at 14 minutes into the movie. You don't see him till 45 minutes after that. You got like a 30-minute period where they're like, these guys are bad. Don't worry about them for the next 30 minutes, over half of the movie, and then they'll come back for a quick little. Whatever. It pissed me off. Go ahead.
I gotcha.
Move forward.
All right, so Kelly, my fellow lover of theater, what did you think of the costume design in this? Because this is where I give an A+ to the people that worked on the film. The costume design in this, I loved it, especially Payne, played by Ben Mendelsohn. I loved how he was dressed, and I feel they put you in the time frame for the costume design. Do you agree, Kelly?
I made no mental notes on costume design because I just think that Westerns, like, it's already drawn for you how to make people dress. And outside of that one coat, nothing stood out to me as like, whoa, look at this. I mean, there's a whole scene where Jay is trying on a new coat and there's a bullet in it, or there's a bullet wound in it. Somebody died in that coat. Whoa. Other than that, though, it was just like, here's cowboy clothes, and here they are in a clothing line.
Okay.
I didn't really think anything of the costuming.
Kevin?
Sorry.
What about you?
I just gotta echo Kelly on that one. I definitely didn't take any real notes on it. It wasn't bad, and Westerns are paint by number formatting when it comes to that stuff. But they did a great job.
I also...
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, I agree. I think
I
the fake pastor guy was also dressed really cool. Speaking of...
Yeah, I don't know.
Can we not say...
No, he had a pretty good...
Can we not say that's not the coolest gun case of all time?
Leather gloves.
Like, I've never seen a sniper... I've never seen a sniper in the West, but that was cool. And when he just picked it out, oh man, that was dope.
Oh, so quick firearm thing. That gun is awesome, but most of the revolvers.
What kind of gun is it?
I don't remember. I have to look it up. It's like
thank you.
It's a single shot something or other, but whatever. Anywho, the Peacemaker, which is the gun that won the West or whatever, not the gun that won the West, but the Peacemaker revolver is like well known. It didn't come out till after this movie was set, so I don't know what the deal with that, but they have it in this film all over the place.
Well, I play Fortnite, and that is a old classic Western DMR. That's what the pastor had.
Did they have snipers back then? When was the first sniper?
Yeah, technically a rifle,
like
any rifle could be a sniper.
That was a rifle with just a sight on it.
Just huge iron sights.
Okay.
Yeah. That you could adjust.
It looked kind of homemade.
Yeah.
When was the scope
invented,
invented, though? Like the sniper scope?
Like the optical scope? That's a good question. I don't know.
Probably.
It's like scopes. Like
Doc Brown did
it.
Binoculars. Yeah, Doc Brown had one in Back to the Future. So.
But Blaze is right, though. Sniper Priest gets Best Dressed Award for sure.
Binoculars were invented in 1823 by Johann Friedrich Voigtländer. And so I think it probably, scopes at least, might have been carried over to the United States by this point.
1835 to 1840 is when the very first
thank you, guys.
telescopic rifle sight was invented.
All right.
Well, there we go.
Little fun facts for you. Anyway, let's skip right ahead to the final scene now, because I got a few questions about this final scene, because there's a whole lot that happens in here. So, we figure out Rose is at this picturesque wooden cottage in the middle of a Colorado field. Jay and Silas just kind of perfectly happen upon this cottage by accident. But either way, Silas ties Jay to a tree and decides to head in where Rose is with her father, John Ross. And a young Native American man is also there who is just credited as young Native boy. And before this, we had the pastor at her front door, and this is, why we were just talking about the scope and everything. Either way, what did you think of this final shootout scene, and specifically, what do you think of how it was executed? Blaze?
Badass. Best part of the movie. I loved it. Dude, Rose is such, for someone that we didn't really get to know, she fucking kicks ass. I love those single shot rifles where you go and when you do it in slow motion, it's really cool.
The lever action?
Yeah.
That's not single.
And then, the brilliant idea, because they were totally outmanned and outgunned. Young Native boy, he shoots the flaming arrow into the sunflowers, and then as they're coming out of the smoke in slow motion, I thought it was as far as an action scene goes, where it doesn't feel like a lot's at stake, but it makes you feel like a lot's at stake. I thought it was awesome. There was the guy who got shot at the door, and they're trying to close the door, but his fat ass won't let them close it all the way. And then
I love that.
And then at the end, you just see his ass cheeks. I'm like, am I supposed to laugh at this?
You are, for sure.
So yeah, I thought it was excellent. It was excellent. My only notes are Michael Fassbender's character Silas gets shot way too early, and he kind of just sits on the sidelines for way too long for a guy who tied a kid to a tree and said, "I'm gonna go out and be a badass." He didn't really do anything. He got shot and was looking for a lighter. But everyone else played their roles perfectly. I thought it was awesome. That was my favorite part of the movie, and I would definitely recommend that last 10, 15 minutes just for the action part.
One of my favorite movies, Eric knows this, but for everyone else, Seven Psychopaths. Near the end of it, there's this big scene, and it's the perfect place for a final shootout. And they're having peyote together, and he explains, and a screenplay he's helping his friend write, this is how it's going to go. And he describes all of the characters in kind of vague terms, and he thinks of himself as this big hero, and he just explains in way over the top detail about how everything's going to go down, and it's the perfect place for a shootout. This is kind of like his dream becoming reality, where there's no reason that Rose should have been as successful as she was. There's no reason that all of these outlaws, and we were primed previously that all the outlaws that are left are the best of the best. The worst ones went early, the best ones went early, so it's the middle ones went. It's just the ones who were really, really good that are left. So, why did they shoot the house right away is kind of interesting. Why did they pop? And this was my favorite part of it, was all of them popping up one at a time from the field just to shoot and pop back down again. And I'm like, how is there not friendly fire happening? Oh, it's just fantastical. That's
Fortnite
why.
rules. No friendly fire.
It was some Fortnite rules, but even then they would have just rocketed that house down real quick. But it was just fantastical and crazy, and it made me think of Seven Psychopaths and the way that movie probably should have ended. It was just over the top, and that's how I felt.
Personally, I would, since they have Kamehamehas in Fortnite now, I'd probably just Kamehameha the house down.
Stop talking about Fortnite. No
To
one cares
our
about your
13-year-old A24 listeners.
Yeah, that's a good segue, Cole. Tell us how you really feel.
So,
this is for a child audience.
Blaze, I love you, but you are so wrong. This final scene, final gunfight I wrote was bad. I hate everything. Why is this stupid?
Damn.
I did not.
We're gonna be divisive
I did not like it. I didn't
bad.
like it.
Right.
Again, it goes back to, it feels like Wes Anderson is I'm gonna make a Western shootout, and it's you got these guys. Why are they popping up and down into the middle of a wheat field? That's so stupid. They're all They're all
So
shooting
silly.
like revolvers and lever actions. There's no reason for them to duck for cover and then come back up because they're not shooting the single action rifle the single shot rifle like the sniper guy was, which is a Sharps, by the way. I did look it up. I finally figured it out. But he was using a Sharps rifle. So like none of them had any reason to do that. Also, Michael Fassbender gets shot, right? And he's at the front of the house. He crawls to like the side or the back or the side of the house, right? And then that one guy who's a part of the bounty hunters or outlaws comes and stands next to him and is just like, oh shit, and he's about to shoot him. He gets shot. Who fucking shot him? Like, who
cares?
Tell me who shot him. He wasn't by a window. The native kid and the girl were still inside. Like, there's no reason for him to get shot. I hated this scene a bunch. And then the only thing that I thought more and more about this scene, the only part that I started to like more was just all of like the weird shit that happened that were like sayings coming to life, right? Like the guy gets shot and they close the door and it pulls his pants down. He got caught with his pants down, right? And then the kid comes in, he gets shot in the heart, and he gets shot in the heart right when he sees the girl and she doesn't recognize him, and it's like you feel like you just got shot in the heart. Well, he fucking actually did. And then he gets salt poured onto his wound. He actually gets fucking salt poured onto his wound.
Like when the native guy comes to kiss his girl.
That stuff. I was like, okay, that's like, is this a comedy? Is it not a comedy? Is it a tragedy? I'm very confused. This fight is annoying, and I did not care for it.
You can be all those things, though. You can be a tragedy.
It's a tragic comedy.
Like,
that's what it is.
But
it's
it
a tragic
didn't.
comedy.
You can have little jokes in there.
I don't think
I'm
it
just
did
gonna
it
say
well
one
at all,
thing.
and I did not care for this.
I just want to say one sentence. I bet you are the funnest person to watch a James Bond movie with. Because thank you, Kevin. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. That segues me to this.
There's
so
good
Cole
westerns.
just gave you a
This is
literal
not good
interpretation.
westerns.
All right, so Mr. Literal over here just gave you all the reasons why he hated this scene and broke it down from a gun battle tactics standpoint. I'm going to take a complete opposite approach, and I loved the crap out of this scene in general. So it was the third and final act of this film. It absolutely fit the bill for me as someone who was watching this with the guise of it being a story in just the most fantastical, ridiculous, like Kelly said, over-the-top way possible. We get excellent cinematography in this particular moment where we get shots of the house with the field, our individual protagonists as they're fighting. The angles in general was awesome. And you kind of all alluded to the little parts that made this scene stand out as far as bad guys coming out or the shots through the door. Also, our gentleman does have a name. His name is Katori. So he's no longer the young native. Katori is, and they say it a couple of different times in there, mostly I think his scene was excellent where he puts his hand in the blood, which just happens to be Jay's blood, which was kind of ironic in that circumstance, and then goes full battle mode, which was an awesome scene for me. I loved the lighting of the forest on fire. I thought that whole scene was awesome. In general, from top to bottom, the way that they executed keeping the viewer involved in the different storylines while you knew that the meeting of Jay and Rose was going to be the focal point of this, they did not miss with that moment where Jay just walks in and you as an audience kind of have a collective gasp, essentially, when Rose shoots him, and you're just like, holy shit. All of this for that, and this, sure, it was heavy-handed. It absolutely hit the viewer in the mouth like, oh, of course, a tragedy in the greatest sense of the word, where our main protagonist is getting towards his goal and all of a sudden is thwarted at the last moment in the most ridiculous way possible. And then, as Cole said, with the salt in the wound, yes, it was very heavy-handed, but I felt that it was perfect. It felt the scene was good. So I enjoyed the ending, and it worked for me.
Jay ends up getting shot by Rose, our main character. This is a very bold choice for a movie to take, and she didn't know it was Jay, but then salt falls on his gunshot wounds when the shooting is done, and Rose notices that it's Jay when the shooting is done. She says, "Silly boy," and kisses him on the cheek before he dies. And then we see that Silas kind of ends up with a happy life with Rose and 2 kids. That might have been a dream sequence. We don't really know for sure. My question is, though, we kind of have like what a normal plot would be. It starts out with that. We have a character with an unrequited love looking for his lost love. And it all just gets flipped on its head in the very last scene. Rose is like this awesome person who just shoots a bunch of people. The main character dies, and yeah, we have that. But either way, was this film a big fuck you to incels? Kelly?
No. As funny as that is, no, it's not.
Because Jay is your classic incel. He thinks that he deserves something that he really doesn't. He wanders across the entire country, kind of like a creepy guy, and then he ends up getting shot. He gets salt poured on his wounds, and he dies.
Now, I think that his whole issue is that he's rich and naive. So that's his problem. And I have little to no sympathy for unrequited love being a motivation for anything. So I think it's obvious I don't like Jay, but I won't call him an incel. He doesn't hate all women or think that he's better off without them or want to do harm to them.
Okay.
So it's not a FU to incels. It's just Jay being Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's an incel. I think he's, like Kelly said, young, naive, stupid. I think he thinks that he deserves more than what he got, I guess, out of Rose, and he thinks that, his grand gesture, he reads way too many stories, and he needs to come to the real world. And honestly, him getting shot in the heart, I thought was a great turn to this movie, and was like a great, kind of like, fuck you, yeah, he's not going to end up with her, she didn't love him. He's a crazy, dumb kid that just showed up in the middle of a shootout. So I thought that was and I did like that scene, especially when he burst in. If you're in a shootout and someone bursts in, you're probably going to shoot the person that burst in. So that was pretty good. Although, you're talking about how great, of a shot Rose is and stuff. She shoots him in the heart, immediately turns around, closes her eyes, and just shoots the gun, 5 times outside the window. She's not that great, all right? All of a sudden, she turns into like the Terminator at the end with the Henry repeater rifle. But, yeah, I don't think he's in, so I think he's just dumb. Like this one.
Let's forget the insult part, I guess. That was more of a joke. But, Blaze...
That's your question.
Yeah.
Question.
Come on.
Well, I'm not taking it back. It's just a joke, though. Anyway, Blaze, what did you think, about how this film sort of did turn the Western on its head in a way with the ending? It definitely, with these kind of films, the main character usually ends up with the loved one, and this one it didn't.
First of all, you said that they had 2 kids. I think those were the 2 kids whose parents they shot.
Oh, sorry, they didn't have 2 kids. Yeah, they adopted
the
them.
orphans.
So just, that was just a pre-load to the incel question, so I was like, no. But no, that was my favorite part of the movie. I thought that was so crazy that they went that far to where, she shoots him in the heart, and then, she doesn't even recognize him for the first 20 minutes after she shoots him. It wasn't until the very end of the fight where she even realizes that she shot her old friend. And I was like, there's no way he's going to die. There's no way he's going to die. And then he dies, not as a coward, but he dies, protecting the one that he loves. And yeah, I really felt like, in any other Western film, that would have been the part where she goes, oh, wait, I do love you. And then, they jump on a horse and fire off and, he finds the might of 1,000 men. But no, it ended very abruptly, subversively, and very poorly for Jay. But I do think it was a very cool, different ending, especially for the Western genre.
So we danced around this subject a little bit here, but this movie's an excellent blend of genres for me, right? We talked about the tragic comedy, so taking some dark comedy notes, mixing it with more serious theme. We've obviously talked about the classic Western. I do think that this is a very unique take on the Western and the modernization of it. I do love, in general, kind of the way they approached it, because it makes this movie kind of stand out as a unique approach to the genre in general, which makes it stand out for me in the movie world in general. Now, obviously, I was unfamiliar with this before this podcast, but on this go through, I want to go back and watch more Westerns, right? I want to learn more about the genre and why it continues to kind of be that genre that is constantly revisited throughout all of film history, right? We have old school Westerns, newer Westerns, and then even more modern Westerns. It's just a genre that continues to doesn't seem to age. There's a mysteriousness to that time in history, and I just think it was well done in general.
I'll send you some good westerns because
please do.
This one.
Yeah, True Grit's really my exposure.
Well, and there's neo-westerns like The Rover, you know.
Yes.
And,
Good point.
Yeah, I mean Mad Max.
Mad Max, Fury
it's like
Road,
a dystopian sci-fi western.
No Country
you know?
for Old Men is like a western-esque too. I mean, there's like a
Yeah.
lot of modern ones, but
Yeah, a lot of the most famous directors that we've known in our lives have made an attempt at a western, and for good reason. Like, it's part of cinema history.
Yeah.
Seven Samurai.
All right. Yeah. And finally, this film ends with Silas turning a horseshoe from down to up, nailing it to the wall, and then Silas just says, "Ho for the West." Kelly, what does that mean, and did you really take anything grander away from this film?
That was just the name of the book that Jay was carrying around. And I think that they really wanted to bury it home over and over again that that book is more of an influence than you might think on your first watch. But they show it in his pocket. They mention it at the end. They show it in the river getting washed away. What does it mean? What could it mean? Let's hit you over the head with this book. Kevin wants
I just
to say
think
something.
that we alluded to it earlier. I think he's sitting in Scotland just reading this book over and over and over again, and it gives him this idea that he can actually do what he does. So without the book, I don't think we have a vehicle for a movie whatsoever, and I think the director wants us to, like you said, hammer over the head that this is very relevant, but mostly because Jay has read that book back to cover. He knows everything in it, and it's truly his influence on why he thinks he can handle himself in the Wild West by himself as a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah, and it's why everything's ridiculous and why the dialogue... I was going to save this for the end, but it's perfect. It's why the dialogue sounds like when my nephew is playing with his Legos.
Jeez,
There you go.
That's
harsh.
That's the way they talk to
Legos
each
are
other.
awesome.
All right. Blaze, did you take anything grander away from this film?
As a bigger overall message, not too much. I think it's more of a story contained within the lives of the people that lived it in this film. I do think the horseshoe does represent, good luck, hope for the West. The part that horseshoe is almost like cylindrical. So like you definitely go through that loop, and Michael Fassbender is on that other side of being a loner, nobody, just doing stuff for the money and survival, as they keep saying in the film. And now he's made that arc into being a more well-rounded person who cares more about other people than himself. But as far as a big, grander message like Ex Machina last week, I mean, that's so far off. It's just more of a story, like everyone's been saying, instead of like a big overarching theme.
I don't think this film had a whole lot of anything going on with it. I'm sure you guys have picked up by now. I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie. I felt like, it was short, and usually like those 90-minute movies, I'm like, this thing's probably going to be pretty good because it's tight, clean. This movie was not. I honestly think if it was longer and more fleshed out, it would have been better. But there was like a lot of the weird stuff going on that I didn't particularly care for. Maybe I wasn't in the right mindset for it, but I didn't take anything out of this bad boy.
All right. So let's get to ratings here. I think I'm going to go down to up, and I'm going to start with Kelly over here.
I don't know if I'll be worse than Cole. We'll see. Okay.
Challenge accepted.
Here's my notes. Cole mentioned many times before I could, big Wes Anderson energy coming through here. And I know that Wes Anderson is a bit of a polarizing kind of theme for all of his taste. I am someone who really does not like it, and it came through very heavy for me in this movie. Here's reasons I don't like Wes Anderson films. I find them alienating, and they make me uncomfortable in that regard. I find them repetitive. I see these shots that are symmetrical, that are supposed to be artistic, but are just continuing on that repetitive theme. And they're like trying to be charming, but in a way that doesn't get pulled off. So it just feels kind of threatening and adds to that just like discontent, upset stomach feeling. So that movie, or this movie that we watched, very much had that Wes Anderson vibe. The soundtrack we didn't touch on absolutely irritated the heck out of me. It was grinding straight into my brain. It did not fit, for me, the theme of this movie at all. And it was like I just mentioned with Wes Anderson films, very repetitive, the same thing. Sometimes it was circus music, sometimes it was like Italian guitar, sometimes like it did not fit for me, and it would come over so loud they would talk under it. So it was almost like the sound mixing didn't work well for me in those spots either. I also said it's absurd, but in a way where it doesn't fully lean in all the time. It kind of goes in and out as it pleases, so it's not really strong in either regard. I just mentioned the dialogue for me was always pretty just not deep enough. Like there wasn't enough there. It was just quick. There were those one-liners, and sometimes they were funny, but it wasn't anything funnier than like Life After Beth for me. That's about the amount of funny that I found this movie. So overall, though, I was also very bored from beginning to end. Cole just mentioned maybe I wasn't in the right mindset, or he wasn't, but I feel that same way. Maybe I wasn't either, but I was just bored and I just wanted it to be done. I didn't enjoy this movie at all, and I would never recommend it to anyone because if they knew that I watched it, what would they think of me? So, that said, I'm going with an E24.
Okay, Cole?
Yeah, so I am so happy that Kelly and I are on the same page with Wes Anderson. I do not care for his movies at all. I've tried. I've watched pretty much all of his movies, from like Isle of Dog to like Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest Hotel. I just don't. Isle of Dog is the only one that I actually was like, this is actually a decent movie. And it turns out it doesn't have people in it; it's all puppets and stuff. But beside the point, Wes Anderson sucks. This movie was like a cheap knockoff of it. Drove me crazy through the whole film. The comedy was just not there. I didn't care that I felt like they failed on the comedy, they failed on the Western, they failed to make me feel things. And the only part was at the end where they were just like, what if we just made a shootout and made a bunch of puns but made them real? And I was just like, fuck this. I don't care for it. Again, maybe maybe you need to be high and having a good time, and maybe you'll like this movie. I wasn't in the right mindset.
I feel personally attacked right now.
But as a person who genuinely loves Westerns and loves the time period and loves, the Red Deads and all the movies and stuff like that, if you want to talk about a good over-the-top Western, this is not it. Watch Django Unchained. That has comedy beats. That has over-the-top shootouts and stuff. That is done right. This is not. I didn't care for it. However, I struggled to give things an E24, so Kelly is going to be the lowest. I've given this a D-24. Overall, didn't care for it. I thought it was boring throughout 90% of it. The shootout was bad, and it was only an hour and 15 minutes, and I felt like it was forever. So, that's it. Yeah. I'm over. Bye.
Blaze?
Yeah. So, there's a lot that I have to agree with Cole and Kelly on this. I think the biggest issue is, like Cole said, it needed to be fleshed out more. They explored a lot of things and then abruptly just threw them to the side. When they were at the general store and they shot these two immigrants who were trying to rob the store, and then they ransack the store and they see the two kids and they just kind of leave it. I mean, the kids come back, but that's so unbelievable in its own right. There was a very cool dynamic between Silas and Jay, between, rich upper stuff, kid who's really never been out in the world versus hardened criminal, guy who walks the line, who's been around the block. And they never really went into that either. Starting with the absinthe scene from the bonfire, when he stumbles onto the bonfire, to the shootout, to the ending, I thought it was balls to the walls, wonderful. I thought best 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the film was amazing. And I did think that the set was cool. I really liked the New Zealand, the mountains. I liked the forest. I like, the plains. I liked a lot of the, smaller, nuancy stuff. When you get to the bottom of it, it just, like Cole said, they didn't touch on enough things to make me want to care about any character. So it really left me wanting at the end, which kind of sucks. So I do like the effort. I do think the characters did a really good job with what they had. But at the end of the day, it's Not a great movie. It's not a Western like Cole said or Kelly said I would recommend to any of my friends because my friends hold me in higher esteem, I would hope. But I am going to give it a little bit better. I am going to say D plus 24. There are some saving nuggets that I did like about it, but overarching, not for me. So D plus.
All right, so I have a lot of different feelings about this going right now. Mostly that we're so different on our opinions on this film, and I only can equate that to me not being the ridiculous film enthusiast that the four of you are, right? And maybe that's wrong in that sense, but I enjoy what little exposure I have of Wes Anderson, so I guess that maybe for me why I enjoyed this film more than the others. I've said almost ad nauseum that I treated this film as if I was watching a live storytelling, like a storybook or a legend of some sort. And I think that skewed the way that I looked at it from a review standpoint in general. I did enjoy the storyline and the characters, and as you know by now by listening to this episode, I've said a lot of great things about it in general and I've had not a ton of critical things to say. That being said, it's still, I don't want to come across as this is my favorite movie of all time. A lot of the criticisms that you guys have been saying are absolutely true. So I do want to say, though, that from my perspective, it was unique in viewing it from the first time, and as someone who doesn't enjoy movies or doesn't watch a lot of movies in general, picking this one up and trying to digest it has been fun for me after the fact, more so than when I was watching it live, which is also a unique thing when you kind of start digesting some reviews and start looking at some of the things that you maybe didn't notice on your first watch through. It maybe skews the way that you look at a movie. But for me, and that's definitely true for this particular film, I think at the end, I enjoyed the artistic approach by our director. I thought it was interesting that he was a former musician with the Beta Band, and he had a lot of influence in the punk rock scene kind of coming into this. So anytime you take someone who's classically trained in music and move them into film, I think that you take a more artsy approach to whatever you're doing. And it's very clear with this film that that was the approach that our director took. The influences from other directors we've mentioned are very clear. In general, I thought the setting was great. The scenery was good. The dialogue was a little bit lacking, but I enjoyed the story from start to finish. It had all of the parts of a great story for me. So for that, even though it's such a departure from the rest of your grades, I do have to give this film a B24. Because me personally enjoyed it and would recommend it for someone who likes the artsier side of things and are not looking from a realistic portrayal. And I agree that it's not a true Western, so that also makes it a little bit more difficult. But that's my rating, B24. I enjoyed it, even though you all seemed not to as much. But that's fine. That's why we do these things, so we can have
this is your
conversations
spring
about
breakers.
the
It's
different
nice
side
to
of
meet you.
films. Yay!
No, actually, Kevin, I was going to say don't let the others drag you down. Because, honestly, I really enjoyed this film. You guys kept saying Wes Anderson, and I kind of want to say Wes Anderson wasn't the first person to do symmetrical shots of landscapes. So
I was
didn't
talking
say that.
about
people kept
No
on
one
saying
said
Wes
that.
Anderson. I'm like, this is not Wes Anderson. I disagree completely. This isn't Wes Anderson. Either way.
so a symmetrical shot is only Wes Anderson. I'm
What
talking
I
about like
like
the
was-
weird.
Well, you guys are
that
saying
what we
like you're getting
argued?
Wes Anderson vibes
yeah,
from the
because of like
cinematography.
I
don't
said
agree with that.
cinematography. I said all the weird goofiness and bullshit that gets thrown in the mix that makes
I-
no sense.
I don't think.
The
I think Wes
palette, the
Anderson's
music.
dialogue is much worse. I think he's not a great screenwriter, and the people that write screenplays for him aren't great. I actually think this screenplay was actually pretty phenomenal, and I love all the one-liners. I love a lot of the ambiguous lines that they say. You know, I love
like kill the
right
house.
before. Yeah, like right before Rose, shoots out and Katori launches that arrow into the field. She says, "Until civilization arrives." I love all these little one-liners in here. I do agree that this film was a little too short. It was only an hour 23 minutes. They could have explored Payne, his character, a lot more, and they could have created a much greater villain. I completely agree with that. But everything else in here, from the costume design to the cinematography to the screenwriting to the acting, I thought was pretty superb, actually. And I kind of disagree with you guys on a lot of the points. And I think this was actually pretty original, too. I think it turns a Western on its head And I think it is a Western. I just think that I think the ending definitely turns the classic Western tale on its head. So I'm actually going to give this a B24. I'm going to be right there with Kevin. I'm not going to, shit all over this film. I think that this film was universally loved for a reason. And I'm not saying this just because I know that it got, good critical ratings. As a screenwriter, like somebody who's written a screenplay, I really appreciated this film for every little line that was in here.
It made $67,000.
Well, that's an indie film. Sometimes,
Wow.
Sometimes great
That
films
doesn't
don't
mean
make a lot of money.
A $2 million indie film made
You said it best. The
$67,000.
little
Don't ever
lines,
look at how much Citizen Kane made.
Right. Love is universal, like death. I think that's just really what we need to talk about this film. Like, that's just a big deal. But anyway.
And man, I mean, Michael Fassbender,
Well, man.
I love him. He's awesome. I know that he kind of played this old John Wayne type character, but I think that he did it in a different kind of way, Yeah. So.
Cool.
All right.
I
very
respect
decisive.
your opinions, Eric, but you're fucking wrong. This movie sucks.
Yeah. And Eric, your screenplays are much better than theirs.
Oh, look at
All
that.
That's
I'll
what's wrong.
take that compliment.
Also,
All right, well,
I never
if you,
said it was Wes Anderson. I never said that. You were grouping me with them. I did not say.
Yeah.
I also never said the cinematography was Wes Anderson. I said like the fucking weird shit that happens in this movie.
If you haven't done so yet, please rate and subscribe our podcast, and please join in on the fun. Good night, everyone.
A24.